It's a place of dreams, hopes, and riches, and its streets are filled with the studios, homes, and landmarks that are monuments to its greatness. Let's go Hollywood backstage and see this unique and fascinating place called Hollywood.
Firestorm officials had feared becoming a reality, with a third out-of-control wildfire exploding overnight in the Los Angeles area.
All the footage in this video shot by me was filmed last year, before the devastating fires of 2025 that caused so much damage and took so many lives. The future of Los Angeles remains a little uncertain, but now let's start the video to have a look at this city in cinema. I am in the city that is most synonymous with cinema, Los Angeles. A city of glamour and tragedy, where your dreams can come true, but more likely become a nightmare. A place where every conversation in a bar turns into people boasting about who they've met. Which actor is an arsehole, who doesn't tip, and who's surprisingly nice. A place where you're either a star or a no one. A city with the rich living in mansions on a mountaintop and the destitute living in tents in Skid Row. But this is also a city with so much to offer. Beautiful beaches, mountains, stunning architecture, and with an amazing history of cinema. I'm wearing this mask because I'm not actually speaking. I don't want to be some annoying loud limey, so if my eyebrows don't match what I'm saying, that's why. This is less a history of film in this city and more how it has been represented in film over the years. But let's start with why this became the filming hub of the United States of America. In the 1910s, D.W. Griffith started making films on the West Coast, filming initially in downtown LA, but then explored a little further and ended up in the little village, Hollywood. Many other filmmakers then moved out west to avoid Thomas Edison's fees on patents on the movie-making process. And this, along with warm weather and sunshine all year round, meant that by the 1930s, most films were shot on the West Coast. Back in the world of silent cinema, many stars made films in Los Angeles, and one of the best was Harold Lloyd's astonishing 1923 comedy, Safety Last. The climax, where Lloyd has to scale a building, was shot at various locations across downtown, all at different heights, with sets being built upon roofs to match the facade of the International Bank building behind me. It remains one of the most iconic scenes in film history, but cinema was about to change forever with the birth of the talkie. And one of the best films to deal with the impact that had on Hollywood was the 1952 classic musical Singing in the Rain. Set in 1927, it explores the behind-the-scenes look of Hollywood in a humorous fashion. We have Lena, a star of the silent pictures, who is now struggling in the world of the talkie due to her terrible voice.
Pierre, you shouldn't have come.
Pierre, you shouldn't have come.
It's astonishing that already by the 20s we have this idea of divas and huge stars who have emerged in such a young industry. And Singing in the Rain is such a fun movie about the movies, with some truly wonderful musical numbers.
I'm happy again.
And in the 1930s, we entered the golden age of Hollywood. Many great films came out during this period, although it was a period where big studios pushed out endless films. Musicals, screwball comedies, westerns, with stars often playing very similar roles. Some might argue that this makes it less of an art form and more of a cinematic version of fast food, although much like In-N-Out Burger, astonishing fast food. Something about the stars of old Hollywood haunt this city. Yes, there have been countless stars over the years, but if you were a big star of the 30s to the 50s, you've been immortalized. Bogart, Monroe, Brando, Wayne, or James Stewart. Yes, many stars were born here, and many films called A Star is Born have been made here, and the first came out in the 1930s. Amazing again that a world and industry that was still fairly new was telling stories about stars whose time was done and about people coming to Hollywood to chase their dreams of stardom. In many ways, Hollywood was like what the Wild West was in the late 1800s. You go out west to make your fortune, and more likely than not, it went wrong. Yes, going to Hollywood and the dream of becoming a somebody and the nightmare of being relegated to being a nobody became a characteristic of the city of Los Angeles, and also how it was portrayed on the big screen. The dream of winning a little golden man, or how embarrassing things can be on the grandest stage of them all.
What I want's a special award, something nobody else can get. I want a statue for the worst performance of the year.
Something else emerged in the 1930s which also shaped LA and how it was seen in fiction. The hard-boiled novels and the world of noir. Starting with the writers Carol John Daly and Dashiell Hammett, but best associated with Los Angeles was the hard-boiled crime writer Raymond Chandler, who wrote the Philip Marlowe detective books. Here I am outside Marlowe's office, well, at least in some of the books, this is where he was based. This vision of a corrupt, yet glamorous city, filled with bad men and dangerous women, truly added another element to the City of Angels. Raymond Chandler's first Marlowe book was 1939's The Big Sleep, and 7 years later, Howard Hawks adapted the film, starring the legendary Humphrey Bogart and his real-life wife, Lauren Bacall, as the leads. A film about tough men, femme fatales, and a seedy Los Angeles. And the best representation of the 1930s through the noir lens has to be Roman Polanski's Chinatown. Here I am on the street where the heartbreaking ending happened, although the street has changed a lot since then.
Forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown.
We follow Jack Nicholson's typically nonchalant private eye, who gets caught up in a case that links to the real-life California water disputes of the time. And so often in Hollywood films, LA is depicted as a place corrupt to its core. And this is a film full of corrupt, powerful men, women with deep, dark secrets, and loners who love to drink and smoke. This 1974 picture captures the dark side of 1930s Los Angeles brilliantly. As does our next film, but in a rather unique way. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Set in the 1940s, but in a world where people live alongside cartoons. We yet again have a gruff alcoholic private eye who stumbles across a deep conspiracy, this one involving getting rid of the tram network and demolishing part of the town to bring in a new freeway. The sprawling nature of Los Angeles and its endless roads are a huge part of the city. And it's a little strange that it's not dealt with more often on screen. It took this marvelously strange family film to talk about it. And Who Framed Roger Rabbit is one of the very best 1940s set LA noirs.
Toon killed his brother.
What? Huh?
Dropped the piano on his head.
Probably the best film noir of the 1940s was Double Indemnity, shot here, where one of the great femme fatales lived.
It was one of those California Spanish houses everyone was nuts about 10 or 15 years ago. This one must have cost somebody about $30,000. That is, if he ever finished paying for it.
This wonderful Billy Wilder noir has the classic tale of a wife trying to get a lover to kill her husband. And in it, Barbara Stanwyck gives one of the all-time best femme fatale performances. It was co-written by Raymond Chandler, who had been brought in to bring a noir flair. He was a heavy drinker, and he and Wilder clashed in the writing process. And Wilder's next film, The Lost Weekend, was based on his experiences with Chandler. It was commonplace for Hollywood studios to bring in respected authors to the city to work on screenplays. And these authors inevitably had a bad time and drank too much. F. Scott Fitzgerald famously struggled out there while working for MGM, where my grandfather, John Davenport, a critic from London, worked alongside him writing scripts. While out there, my grandfather had been given a tip by novelist William Faulkner, who had done a lot of script doctoring for studios. He said he should write 5 pages a day and never any more, and they believe that you're working. A character based on Faulkner would appear in one of the very best films about screenwriting, the 1940s set Coen brothers masterpiece, Barton Fink. We follow a renowned playwright from New York who is brought to Tinseltown to write a wrestling picture, but the nightmare side of Hollywood engulfs him.
I will destroy him! God.
Devil on a canvas, 12 apple, take 5.
I will destroy him!
12 apple, take 6.
I will destroy him!
12 apple, take 7.
I will destroy him!
John Turturro is amazing in the film, as is the always excellent John Goodman. And in it, John Mahoney plays an acclaimed author from the South, barely getting by in Hollywood as a screenwriter and struggling with drink, who is based on Faulkner. Indeed, the struggling screenwriter is another character who often pops up in Los Angeles set films. And let's move on to the 1950s with another Billy Wilder classic, my personal favourite noir film, Sunset Boulevard. We follow a struggling screenwriter who lived here at the Alto Nido Apartments, who, while hiding from repo men who want his car, which is rather necessary in Los Angeles, he ends up at a strange mansion and discovers Norma Desmond, a half-forgotten silent film star played superbly by Gloria Swanson. And he ends up shacking up with this tragic figure. It encapsulates the madness of Hollywood and the idea of the dried-up star. It's one of my favourite films of all time, and in many ways is the ultimate Los Angeles movie. Ticks all the boxes. A dark noir with murder, but it's also about faded stars, a struggling screenwriter, and a lead character who desperately needs a car to get by in the city.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
And now moving on to another film about faded stars in 1950s Los Angeles, Tim Burton's Ed Wood. Shot partially in this Hollywood dive bar, this is an endearing look at one of the most famous bad directors of all time, Ed Wood. In the film we see his friendship with the real washed-up once great star Bela Lugosi, now struggling with a heroin addiction. It all sounds a little grim, but this is a film with a lot of heart and respect for the real-life people they are covering. And though he never won any Oscars, it shows Wood's love for cinema.
And cut. Perfect. Print it.
Speaking of Oscars, we had our second A Star Is Born in the 1950s.
Are you trying to stop me? Are you trying to stop me going on? Is that
And the other side of LA, the noir side, was shown in the incredibly influential and bleak Kiss Me Deadly. But outside of noirs and films about films, one of the most iconic movies to be shot and set here in the 1950s has to be Rebel Without a Cause, starring another icon of Hollywood cinema, James Dean. An iconic scene was shot up here at the Griffith Observatory, and there is even a statue dedicated to Dean up here, although people seem to have forgotten who he is.
Not there, Sam.
Oh. I don't know, you pointed him out.
There is another master of the nasty side of Tinseltown, one of my favourite authors, James Ellroy. And his 1950s set LA Confidential was turned into a great film by Curtis Hanson. It once again has noir elements, and here we have 3 police officers getting caught up in another huge conspiracy, this one involving hookers who are given plastic surgery to look like movie stars, and some crooked cops attempt to take over the heroin trade in the city.
Karen, this is Sid Hutchins from Hush Hush Magazine.
Hello, Karen.
It even goes into the scandal sheets, which have always been a horrid presence in this city, constantly hounding the people who make it there. And I'm sure Confidential magazine had a lot to say about Joan Crawford. In the film Mommie Dearest, Faye Dunaway turned it up to 11 as she did a hatchet job on Crawford.
Because I am not
one of your fans!
Speaking of Crawford, this is the perfect time to move into the 1960s with another film about faded stars gone mad. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane? Shot at this house behind me. Betty Davis plays Baby Jane Hudson, a former child star who is completely faded from recognition and is looking after / torturing her paraplegic sister, played by Crawford. It's twisted and knowingly camp, and both actresses give wonderful performances, and there is an added bit of joy knowing that they didn't get along in real life. Another master of noir pulp crime was Donald E. Westlake, who, writing as Richard Stark, released the Parker novels, and the first book, The Hunter, was adapted into the exceptionally cool Point Blank, starring Lee Marvin, moving the action from New York to Los Angeles, and a very 60s and psychedelic LA at that. Marvin is perfect casting, and no one can kill a bed quite as well as he can. And another master of pulp fiction, if you pardon the pun, is Quentin Tarantino, who is one of the great directors at capturing Los Angeles on screen, and in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he wrote a love letter to the city, and dealt with a moment that changed the City of Angels forever. The Tate murders put a stop to the counterculture hippie movement that could be briefly seen in Point Blank. Those shocking murders rocked the city of Los Angeles, and Tarantino looked to rectify this with a fantasy look at the city he loved in the time of his youth. Yet again we follow a sort of has-been, although a slightly different type, a former lead of a TV western who is now relegated to playing the heavy of the week on other people's shows. He's a heavy drinker and incredibly insecure, and played hilariously by Leonardo DiCaprio.
Fucking remembering your fucking lines. I practiced them and now I don't look like I goddamn practiced them. You're sitting there like a fucking baboon. I hate fucking whiskey, so I couldn't stop at fucking 3 or 4 8.
And Brad Pitt plays his effortlessly cool, calm and dangerous stuntman / driver. Indeed, this is another totally LA film, with the noir, the movies, and driving all playing huge parts. And watching Brad Pitt drive around the city reminds me of the 1968 Peter Bogdanovich classic, Targets. In it, we follow a man who goes on a mass murder killing spree across the city, and it all builds to him and Boris Karloff, playing himself, meeting at a film premiere. Again, the dark, the twisted, and the movies colliding in an unexpected fashion.
What turns an all-American boy into an all-American killer?
Now moving into the 1970s with the second Philip Marlowe movie on this list.
With the exceptionally good The Long Goodbye, where this time we have Elliot Gould play Marlowe in an even more nonchalant way. And we have another film filled with deception and dark characters. But by the 70s, our protagonist seems kinda over it all. It was directed by one of the great directors to represent LA, Robert Altman, and the film is full of violence and humour. One of my favourite scenes is when Marlowe delays a heavy following him by talking to a gate guard who loves to do impersonations of Hollywood celebrities.
Stranger, what can I do for you? I'm following that car. No cars out there. That's been sagebrush and a few covered wagons. You friend of my boy Billy? What? I left Billy out there on the flatlands to die. I'm gonna get him. How was that? How was what? My imitation of Walter Brennan.
Walter Brennan? And a director who was heavily inspired by Altman would carry on the torch in portraying Los Angeles, Paul Thomas Anderson. And in his second movie, we have someone yet again entering the movie industry. But I'm not talking about the movie industry. No, in Boogie Nights, we enter the world of the porn industry. Anderson's film captures the excesses of the 70s and 80s fantastically. We are certainly far from the golden age of Hollywood by now, but we still have narcissistic stars with big egos and now even bigger Johnsons. And it's a city where violence is always just around the corner, even at your local donut shop.
Give me this. Oh.
Los Angeles is portrayed so well by Anderson, who returned to the city's past in both the noirish Inherent Vice and Licorice Pizza.
Do you know who my girlfriend is?
Barbra Streisand?
Barbra Streisand.
Sand.
Sand, yeah, like sands. Like the ocean, like beaches.
Barbra Streisand?
No, like Streisand.
Sand.
And speaking of Barbra Streisand, in the 70s, we also got our third A Star Is Born. Now let's move into the 1980s, when we got some top-notch action films shot here. Yes, in 1988, arguably the greatest action film of all time was released, Die Hard, which was shot at the Fox Tower in this city, standing in for the Nakatomi Plaza. There's not much else that's very LA about it, but it felt remiss not to include it in this video.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Indeed, a lot of the action films shot here don't really have LA as a character in their films, such as the Lethal Weapon franchise, the first two of which I really love. And the films were shot across the city, including great Los Angeles locations, including the 2nd Street Tunnel, which is the tunnel in everything. One film with a lot of action that did, however, capture LA quite well was William Friedkin's 1985 thriller To Live and Die in LA, which captures noir Los Angeles in a brilliantly 1980s way. But there was an action film that dealt with a new side of Los Angeles. The vapid, rich world of Beverly Hills was mocked by Eddie Murphy as Axel Foley in Beverly Hills Cop, where we get a tough Detroit cop who arrives in the city to investigate the murder of his best friend, and much of it is just Foley aghast at the lifestyle of the rich but not so famous. And this new type of out-of-touch, mega-rich culture is dealt with in other films, in a very unique way in the 1980s set Safe, starring Julianne Moore, as a rich Los Angeles housewife who is convinced she is very ill indeed. And it was dealt in another incredibly unique way in John Carpenter's They Live, where Roddy Piper arrives in LA and finds a pair of magical glasses that allow him to see that the rich are actually aliens keeping humanity in their place. This film deals with the rich-poor divide in the city in a genuinely interesting but also fun way.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Now, how better to bridge the 80s to the 90s than talk about the Terminator films? Again, neither one really embraces Los Angeles as a character, but in the first one, the future governor of California arrives in LA to hunt down a woman, and in the 1990s, he arrives to protect her son, and one of the great chases was shot here. So now that we're in the 90s, let's talk about another film that shows a side of the city that was too often ignored in LA set films before. Boys in the Hood, showing the tough lives of those living in South Central Los Angeles. This is a story about young men who get caught up in the gang scene there. The inequality in the city is brilliantly described by Lawrence Fishburne as the father of our lead.
Why is it that there's a gun shop on almost every corner in this community?
Why?
Tell you why. For the same reason that there's a liquor store on almost every corner in the black community. Why? They want us to kill ourselves.
The film also starred Ice Cube of the NWA, and that band was covered in the film Straight Outta Compton, which also covers the 1992 Los Angeles riots. After the tape of Rodney King being beaten by members of the LAPD came to public attention, things started to heat up in the city, but it reached boiling point when the cops involved were acquitted. The riots were just a part of the racial tension in the city, and this bled into films such as Menace to Society and in Falling Down, with Michael Douglas, who plays an office worker who loses his mind one day and goes on a rampage against all his issues in the city, including the gangland, Korean shopkeepers overcharging, and even down to fast food venues only serving breakfast at a certain time.
And you, ma'am? How's the food?
Racial tension was further explored in American History X, with Edward Norton and Edward Furlong as two neo-Nazis in the city. Some of it was shot at the Venice Beach basketball courts. But the most famous film shot here would be one of Stanley Kubrick's favorite movies, White Men Can't Jump.
I only have 4 words for you. White men can't jump.
Also living in Venice Beach was one of Los Angeles' great heroes, the Dude, who starred in the Raymond Chandler-inspired comedy, The Big Lebowski.
Where's the money, Lebowski? Where's the money, Lebowski? Where's the fucking money, shithead?
It's down there somewhere. Let me take another look.
For driving in LA, we got the Keanu Reeves action picture Speed. Steve Martin showed how he felt about the city in his comedy LA Story. And in the 90s, we got two masterful films about the city from Robert Altman. In The Player, we got a noir comedy about the film industry where a Hollywood producer begins to receive anonymous death threats. And the following year, Altman made the underappreciated Shortcuts, film that follows 22 people in the city and paints a fascinating picture of people from all walks of life here. And you get the feeling that Altman knew this city better than anyone. And his de facto apprentice, Paul Thomas Anderson, also made his LA film about dozens of characters, Magnolia. Here I am in the bar where we had another LA washed-up has-been, although this time not a star of film, but a formerly famous kid competitor on a game show. The dartboard behind them is incredibly popular here.
Hey!
I love you. I love you, and I'm sick. I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you tomorrow. I'm getting corrective oral surgery tomorrow for my teeth.
So for 1990s noir, there was the very fun adaptation of Elmore Leonard's Get Shorty, where a Miami gangster comes to LA and gets involved in the film industry. And we have a film that feels like a modern-day Parker novel, with 1995's exceptional Heat.
She got a great ass! And you got your head all the way up it!
And Michael Mann was able to get across the size of this city better than any director before him, with this huge epic crime film that builds to an astonishing shootout in downtown LA. But maybe the most exceptional LA director to emerge in the 1990s was Quentin Tarantino, with Reservoir Dogs shot in this diner, and he followed that with the remarkable Pulp Fiction. Here I am at the house where Uma Thurman is saved by John Travolta in a heart-stopping scene where he starts her heart. And then his final film of the 90s is the criminally underrated crime film Jackie Brown, also based on an Elmore Leonard novel. Shot at this club, which I didn't realise was a strip club, so this is the only angle I can film here.
Is she dead?
I pretty much.
What do you mean pretty much, Louis? That ain't no fucking answer. Yes or no? Is she dead?
I think so.
You think so? Tell me, Louis. Is she...
Moving into the 21st century, let's start with one of the great films to deal with a wannabe star's dream becoming a nightmare, David Lynch's Mulholland Drive. The late great Lynch loved LA, but was able to show the dark side of it almost better than anyone. And in this surreal neo-noir, he shows just how strange the city can be. At night, Hollywood becomes Holly-weird, and people love to say how bonkers Lynch's worlds can be, but I think his films are often more realistic. He doesn't ignore the weird, and in Los Angeles, the weird is everywhere. The plot follows an aspiring actress who arrives in the city and befriends a woman suffering from amnesia after a car accident. The woman says she is in danger, and the two set out to find her identity. But there is a lot more than just this story. Many other sequences come and go. And much like the other film with the road name as its title, Sunset Boulevard, this is a film not about glitz and glamour, but about madness and suffering. But there is still a love for the city. David Lynch will be greatly missed. The gang side of LA was seen again in Training Day, and some of it was shot at the former Quality Cafe in downtown, where other films such as Seven were shot. The diner is tragically no more. The noir side of the city was explored in the comedy Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, where we have yet another criminal arrive in LA and get involved in the film world. The driving side of the city was captured in Michael Mann's thriller Collateral, where Jamie Foxx's taxi driver drives Tom Cruise's hitman around the city on a bloody night out. And now let's move into the 2010s. Another film that captured driving in LA was the appropriately named Drive, with a Hollywood stunt/getaway driver getting caught up in a noirish violent nightmare. A brilliant film about fame and sensationalism was Nightcrawler, where Jake Gyllenhaal plays an unhinged man who drives around the city chasing accidents to film them and sell to the media. It captures a new side of entertainment, not films, but people's love to consume sensationalist news stories. Similar to Confidential magazine and other media that chased dirt on celebs, now people were chasing stories about real misery. And a film that showed a brilliant new side of the city was Sean Baker's Tangerine. Set on Christmas Eve, we get a transgender sex worker who is looking for her boyfriend/pimp who is cheating on her. It shows the chaos of the city, and Baker is a master at shining a light on people living on the fringes of society.
You must promise me that there's not going to be any drama.
I promise.
Look at me in my eyes and promise.
I promise no drama, Alexandra.
Whoa! What the fuck?
Oh, boy.
Help me off the truck! You didn't have to Chris Brown the bitch.
And up here at the Griffith Observatory, some of La La Land was shot. A film about two people in the city trying to make it big, one as an actress and the other as a jazz pianist. It has definite A Star Is Born vibes, but not as much as our fourth version, starring Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. But what about the future of this city? Well, we got to look at it in Ridley Scott's masterpiece, Blade Runner, set in the distant future of 6 years ago. LA has become a dystopian metropolis full of flying cars and depressed homicidal robots. Scott described the look of the film as Hong Kong on a bad day, and it certainly feels very East Asia, but the noir character of the city still comes shining through. Shot in brilliant locations, such as Union Station, standing in for the police headquarters, and the climax taking place at the remarkable Bradbury Building in downtown. This is a noir film about a detective of sorts, hunting down replicants who have gone astray, and of course he's a miserable alcoholic loner. And its exceptional sequel, Blade Runner 2049, further explores this and even has the deep conspiracy narrative so often seen in films about the city. We already know that the prediction of 2019 wasn't accurate, so we can assume 2049 won't be either. But what does the future hold for the city? Well, probably another version of A Star Is Born, but Hollywood is no longer the filming centre of the states it once was, with other cities such as Atlanta or even cities abroad giving tax incentives. And making your name here doesn't seem as important as it used to be, with people now being able to become internet famous in any old room in their house. And on top of that, we had the devastating fires. It's hard to know what will happen, but like a moth to a flame, this is still a city that attracts people from all around the world seeking fame and fortune. Even though the films made here have been telling people for about 100 years, it'll more than likely go wrong for them. And as the sun sets over the Hollywood hills, I think about this astonishing place, with so much to see and do, and as someone who loves cinema, it will always hold a special place in my heart.
One sees desire take hold in the faces of teenagers as the Hollywood dream replenishes itself. At night, from a high building or hilltop, when the lights of the city are like beacons down below, the dream persists.